The vast city of Anaris stretched out before Evan Hale, an explorer from Earth in all its ancient glory. The air was thick with a sense of history, the buildings towering above him with strange symbols carved into their surfaces, their glow casting an eerie but mesmerizing light. He had never seen anything like this in his life. It was a blend of science and mysticism, of technology beyond his understanding, and of a culture that was far older than humanity itself. Evan's mission was simple: peace, trade, and cooperation. Earth had sent a delegation to the Sanctum World to establish better relations with its advanced civilizations. So far, everything had been going smoothly. He was a part of a small group sent to observe, communicate, and offer humanity's technological advancements. But as he walked through the ancient streets, he couldn't help but feel out of place. It wasn't just the towering structures or the strange creatures passing by with curious eyes. It was the feeling that this was not just another world. This was a world steeped in meaning, tradition, and a power that seemed to hum beneath its surface. Evan had read the reports before arriving. He knew the history of the Sanctum World. Its people, the Saren, were warriors, and their armor was said to be sacred. No outsider had ever touched it. It was believed that the armor was more than just a weapon. It was a bond, a symbol of honor, of strength, and of the Saren's ancient pact with the universe. To touch it was to disrespect the traditions, to provoke the gods, or so the stories went. As he ventured deeper into the heart of the city, Evan marveled at the peaceful harmony between the Saren and their environment. Everywhere he looked, there were people moving gracefully, speaking softly, and bowing to each other with great respect. Their world was both advanced and ancient, as if time itself had passed through this place and yet left it unchanged. Even the technology seemed to blend seamlessly into the natural beauty that surrounded them. Evan's eyes were drawn to a massive hall in the distance, its tall spires reaching toward the sky. He was told it was the Hall of Guardians, a place where the Saren kept their most sacred artifacts, their weapons, their armor, and their history. It was also where the leaders of the planet gathered, and Evan had been invited to see it firsthand, a rare honor for a human. As he approached the hall, he could see the warriors standing guard, their armor gleaming in the light. Each one wore a set of intricate, shining armor, unlike anything Evan had ever seen before. The material seemed to shimmer, almost alive, as if the armor itself contained a soul. It was both intimidating and awe-inspiring, and Evan found himself drawn to it, unable to look away. But it wasn't the armor alone that captured his attention. Standing near the entrance of the hall was a woman, tall and regal, with a presence that commanded respect. Her long silver hair flowed down her back, and her eyes, glowing with a soft golden hue, were fixed on him. She was dressed in the same sacred armor, but hers was different. It was more elaborate, adorned with symbols of her people's ancient lineage. This was Celira, the chief guardian of the armor, a woman of great power and responsibility. Evan had heard of her before. She was the one who led the training of the younger guardians, the one who carried the most sacred armor, and the one who stood at the heart of the Sarians' traditions. She was a symbol of their strength, their honor, and their past. As he approached, their eyes met. For a moment, neither of them spoke. Evan could feel a sense of unease settle over him. He had come here to represent humanity, to build a bridge between their two worlds. But now, standing before Celira, he couldn't shake the feeling that he was trespassing in a world far beyond his understanding. Celira studied him for a long moment, her gaze piercing and intense. Then, without warning, she stepped forward, her voice calm and steady. "Human," she said. "What is it that you seek here, in the heart of our people?" Evan swallowed, unsure of how to respond. He had prepared for this moment, for this exchange, but now that it was happening, he found himself at a loss for words. "We seek peace," he finally managed to say, his voice firm but respectful. "We come in the spirit of cooperation, to learn from each other, to share our knowledge, and to build a future together." Celira's eyes softened slightly. but there was no smile, no sign of warmth. It wasn't that she was cold, but rather that she was the embodiment of the Sarian's traditions, firm, unyielding, and loyal to the sacred bond her people shared with the stars. She nodded slowly, as if considering his words. Then, without another word, she turned and began to walk toward the hall. Evan hesitated for a moment, unsure if he was meant to follow. But before he could decide, Sailira glanced back over her shoulder. "Come," she said simply.
"There is something you must see." Evan followed her, walking behind her as they entered the Hall of Guardians. Inside, the atmosphere was heavy with reverence.
The walls were adorned with ancient carvings, and the air smelled faintly of incense and age-old parchment. In the center of the room stood a large pedestal, upon which rested a set of armor, glowing faintly with an otherworldly light. It was magnificent. Even in the dim light, Evan could feel the power radiating from it. This was the sacred armor of the Saren, the symbol of their strength and their lineage. He had heard of its significance, but now, seeing it in person, he realized how much more it meant. It wasn't just a suit of protection. It was a piece of history, a piece of the soul of the Saren. Sailira stopped in front of the armor, her eyes fixed on it with a reverence that made Evan uneasy. There was something about her gaze, a connection, a bond, as if she too was part of the armor's history, part of its soul. She turned to him then, her expression unreadable. "Do you know what that is?" she asked.
Evan nodded. "It's the sacred armor of your people."
"I've heard the legends. The ones who wear it are said to be chosen by fate, bound to protect your world." Sailira's lips twitched, a faint smile playing at the corner of her mouth. "It is more than just armor," she said quietly. "It is a living thing. It is part of us, and we are part of it. To touch it is to touch the very heart of our people." Evan felt a sudden chill run down his spine. The weight of her words settled over him like a heavy cloak. He had known the importance of the armor, but hearing her speak of it in such a way made him realize just how deep the bond ran. It wasn't just a symbol. It was something far greater, something more sacred. Sailira stepped closer to the armor, her fingers brushing gently against its surface. As she did, a soft hum filled the air, a deep resonance that seemed to echo through the room. Evan could feel it too, a vibration in his chest that made the hairs on the back of his neck stand on end. For a moment, there was silence. Then, without warning, Sailira turned to him. Her eyes narrowed slightly, as if she were studying him in a new light. "You are a human," she said, her voice low. "You have no right to touch this. You cannot begin to understand what it means to us." Evan stood frozen, unsure of how to respond. He had come here with good intentions, hoping to bridge the gap between their people. But now it seemed as though he had stepped too far into a place he was never meant to be. Sailira continued, her gaze intense. "But you did touch it, and that has consequences." Evan's heart skipped a beat. He hadn't meant to disrespect the armor or the traditions of the Saren. His hand had brushed against it by accident when he had tried to catch her as she stumbled earlier. He had no idea that such a simple action would carry such weight. "What does it mean?" he asked, his voice barely above a whisper. Sailira met his gaze, and for the first time, there was a flicker of something, uncertainty, in her eyes. "It means the armor has recognized you," she said, her voice softer now. "But whether that is a blessing or a curse, we will see." And just like that, the room fell silent once more. Evan stood there, caught between worlds. The armor before him shimmered in the dim light, its power now unmistakable. He had touched it unknowingly, but now everything had changed. Sailira turned and began to walk away, her voice quiet but clear. "Follow me. There is more you need to know." Evan hesitated for a moment, his mind racing with questions, but he had no choice but to follow. The journey into the heart of the Saren's secrets was just beginning, and he had no idea where it would lead. Evan followed Sailira through the Hall of Guardians, feeling the weight of her silence pressing down on him. The air was heavy with history, every step they took echoing through the vast chamber. It seemed as though the entire world was holding its breath, waiting for something to happen. He wasn't sure what, but it felt as though he had crossed an invisible line, one that separated the known from the unknown. Sailora moved with a grace that seemed unnatural, her long silver hair flowing behind her like a river of light. She didn't look back to see if Evan was following, but he had no choice but to stay close. There was a pull to her, something magnetic that made it impossible for him to look away. Her presence was commanding, but there was something else there too. A hint of uncertainty, a flicker of doubt.
He had seen it in her eyes earlier, when she spoke about the armor, but she hadn't let him in.
They walked through a long hallway, the walls lined with intricate carvings that told stories of ancient battles and great sacrifices. The carvings seemed to come alive in the low light, their shapes shifting as if they were moving just out of the corner of his vision. It was unsettling, but Evan had been trained to keep his composure in moments like these. This was history, and it was important to remain calm and respectful. At the end of the hallway, Sailora stopped in front of a large circular door. It was unlike anything Evan had seen before, made of some kind of metal that shimmered with a golden hue, as if it was forged from the stars themselves. The door was covered in more carvings, but these were different from the ones they had passed. These were symbols, ancient and unfamiliar, woven together in patterns that spoke of something far beyond Evan's understanding. Sailora placed her hand on the door, and it opened with a soft hum. As she stepped through, Evan followed hesitantly, feeling as though he were walking into another world. The room beyond the door was unlike anything he could have imagined. It was vast, with a high vaulted ceiling that stretched far above them. The walls were lined with shelves that held objects of incredible importance. Ancient relics, weapons, and scrolls that appeared to be thousands of years old. But in the center of the room, standing tall and proud on a pedestal, was the armor. The sacred armor that had caused so much tension earlier. It was still glowing softly, but now it seemed even more alive, as if it were watching them, waiting for something. Sailora stood before it, her eyes fixed on the armor. She didn't say anything at first, as if she were lost in thought, contemplating something deep and personal. Evan stood at a distance, unsure of what to do. He wanted to ask questions, but the silence felt heavy, like it was meant to be respected. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Sailora spoke. "This is the armor of the sacred pact," she said, her voice soft but steady. "It was forged long before any of us were born. It has seen countless battles, countless generations of Saren. It is not just armor. It is a living testament to our people's bond with the universe. It chooses its wearer, not by blood, not by status, but by heart, by soul." Evan's heart skipped a beat. He had read about the armor's importance, but hearing Sailora speak of it in such a personal way made it seem so much more powerful. The armor wasn't just a relic. It was part of the Saren's very identity. He had always assumed it was a symbol of power, of strength, but now he realized it was so much more. Sailora turned to him then, her golden eyes locking onto his. "You touched it," she said quietly, almost as if she were speaking to herself. "Do you understand now what you've done?" Evan swallowed. He had tried to block out the memory of that moment when his hand had brushed against the armor. The reaction he had felt, the hum, the pulse, it had been unlike anything he had ever experienced. But what did it mean? Why had the armor responded to him? I don't understand," he admitted, his voice barely above a whisper. I didn't mean to." "I didn't know. You don't need to explain," Sailora interrupted, her voice sharper now. "It's not about intention. It's about the connection." She looked at him closely, as if searching for something in his eyes.
"The armor has recognized you. But whether that is a blessing or a curse, we still do not know." Evan was silent for a moment, trying to process what she was saying.
He had no idea what the armor's recognition meant, But one thing was clear. He was in deeper than he had ever imagined. This wasn't just a trade mission anymore. This wasn't about diplomacy or peace. This was something else entirely. Scifi stepped closer to the pedestal, her eyes never leaving the armor. She reached out, her hand hovering just above the surface, but she didn't touch it. Instead, she looked at Evan, as if silently asking for permission. Evan nodded, unsure of what else to do. This was her world, her people's legacy. He was just an outsider, a visitor, who had stumbled into something far greater than he could comprehend. Scifi finally placed her hand on the armor, and when she did, the room seemed to shift. The air grew thick with energy, and Evan felt the ground beneath him hum with a deep, resonant vibration. It was as though the very walls of the room were alive, breathing with a pulse of their own. The armor glowed brighter, and for a brief moment, Evan swore he saw something in its depths, a reflection of himself. But not as he was now. He was older, stronger, wearing the armor, standing beside Scifi as an equal. The vision disappeared as quickly as it had come, and Evan was left feeling unsettled. What had that been? Had it been a warning? A sign? Or something else? Scifi withdrew her hand slowly, her expression unreadable. "You've seen it, haven't you?" she said quietly.
The vision. It shows you the future, the path that you may walk.
The armor does not choose its wearer lightly. It sees what others do not. It sees what could be.
Evan's mind raced.
The vision had been so vivid, so real. But what did it mean? Was it a future he was meant to have? Or was it a future he could avoid? He had no answers, but the weight of it was enough to make him question everything he thought he knew about himself. "Why me?" he asked, his voice trembling slightly. "Why did the armor choose me?" "I'm just a human. I'm not a warrior. I'm not even part of your world." Scifi's gaze softened for the first time since they had entered the room. "That is the question," she said. "Why you? And why now? The armor has never chosen a human before. The pact was forged long ago, and it was meant to remain between the Saren and the stars. But you are here, and the armor has responded. We do not know why, but it is not a coincidence."
Evan felt a knot form in his stomach.
He had always thought of himself as just a visitor to these worlds. But now he was part of something much bigger. Something that he didn't fully understand. And he wasn't sure if he was ready for it. Scifi turned back to the armor, her expression hardening. "This is the burden of the chosen," she said. "We do not choose the armor. The armor chooses us. And once it has chosen, there is no turning back. You will be tested, Evan Hale. You will face challenges that will push you to your limits, and whether you succeed or fail, that will determine the future of both your people and mine." The weight of her words hit him like a hammer. Evan didn't know if he was ready for this. He didn't know if he even wanted it, but there was no going back. The armor had chosen him. And whatever that meant, he would have to face it head on. Scifi stepped back, her eyes never leaving the glowing armor. "The enemy will come soon," she said, her voice hardening once again. "And when they do, we will need every ally we can get, even one as unexpected as you." Evan swallowed, his mind racing. "What do you mean?" She didn't answer immediately. Instead, she turned to face him fully, her eyes burning with a fire that spoke of centuries of tradition and untold sacrifice.
"They are coming for the armor," she said, her voice low and dangerous.
"And when they arrive, we will need you, Evan Hale, whether you are ready or not." The days following the conversation with Scifi were filled with tension and uncertainty.
Evan had never experienced anything like this before. A world where ancient traditions and powerful forces collided, and where he was now caught in the middle of it all. The armor had chosen him, a human, and no one seemed to know what that meant. But everyone was beginning to understand that it wasn't a simple matter. Saliraya had given him no easy answers, only the knowledge that his life had changed forever. She had told him that the enemy was coming, and when they arrived, they would want the armor. But it was more than just the armor they would be after. They were coming for everything the Saren stood for their history, for their power. And now, Evan was connected to it all in ways that he couldn't begin to understand. He spent the next few days in a haze of confusion. At first, he had tried to continue with his original mission, to represent humanity, to foster cooperation. But how could he do that now? His role had shifted. He wasn't a diplomat or a visitor. He was a part of the Sarian's fate. He was part of the armor's future, or better or worse. Salira had shown him more of the sacred hall, explained the ancient prophecies, and shared stories of the battles that had been fought for centuries to protect the armor. Yet there was always the unspoken weight between them, the weight of what he had touched, the weight of what the armor had chosen him for. One evening, as Evan walked through the city, trying to clear his mind, he found himself back at the Hall of Guardians. It wasn't planned, but somehow, his feet had carried him there. The sun was setting, casting long shadows over the stone streets. The glow from the buildings had softened, and the air had cooled. It was peaceful, but Evan could feel the weight of everything pressing down on him. He approached the hall and noticed the guards at their posts, standing tall, their glowing armor dimmed in the fading light. They were silent, watchful, as if waiting for something. Or someone. Evan Hale. The voice came from behind him, and Evan turned to see Salira standing in the entrance of the hall. She was dressed in her armor, but tonight there was something different about her. She wasn't just the guardian of the armor anymore. She was a leader, a woman burdened by her people's history and by the unknown future that loomed ahead. "I didn't mean to intrude," Evan said, his voice quiet as he approached her. Salira didn't respond right away. Instead, she studied him for a moment, her gaze piercing. There was a tension between them now, a shared understanding that neither one of them wanted to acknowledge. "You should be inside," she said, her voice calm but firm. "We need to prepare," Evan nodded. "I know, but I needed to be alone for a while." "I understand," she replied softly. "You are not the first to feel the weight of the armor's choice, but you are the first human." There it was again, the weight of it. Evan had never felt so out of place, so unprepared. He was a human, a species just beginning to reach the stars, and yet here he was, part of something ancient and profound. He had been chosen by the armor, by something far beyond his understanding, and now he had to find his place in a war that he wasn't even sure he could survive. Salira stepped forward, her expression softening.
"You should come with me," she said. "There is something I need to show you." Evan hesitated but nodded.
He had learned to trust Salira, even if the weight of her words had only deepened the mystery surrounding him. They walked through the quiet streets, the glow of the city fading into the distance behind them. As they moved deeper into the city, Evan felt a strange sense of foreboding. The air seemed to grow heavier with every step, as if the city itself was holding its breath. They reached a large building on the edge of the city, a place Evan hadn't seen before. It was built into the side of a mountain, with walls that seemed to blend seamlessly into the rock. Salira led him inside, and the air grew cooler, the walls lined with strange carvings that seemed to tell stories of long-forgotten battles and ancient gods. "This is the Chamber of Echoes," Salira said, her voice low. "It is where the history of our people is preserved. The true history. Not the stories you have been told, but the truth that have been hidden." Evan felt a chill run down his spine. What was she about to show him? What truths had been hidden from him? They walked deeper into the chamber, and Evan could feel the weight of the centuries pressing down on him. The walls were covered in intricate carvings, and the air was thick with the smell of incense and old stone. It was as if the chamber had been untouched by time, holding on to secrets that no one had dared to reveal. At the center of the room stood a large stone pedestal, and upon it, a glowing crystal pulsated with a soft, rhythmic light. It was beautiful, but it also seemed wrong, as if it didn't belong here, as if it were something out of place, something that had been lost for centuries. "This," Salira said, "is the heart of the pact. It is the source of the armor's power. It is the heart of the bond between our people and the universe. And it is the key to understanding the choice that the armor has made." Evan stepped forward, his eyes fixed on the crystal. There was something about it that felt alive. The soft glow seemed to pulse in time with his heartbeat, and he could feel an inexplicable pull toward it.
"Take a closer look," Salira urged. "The heart is what keeps the armor alive."
It is what binds it to us, but it is also the reason why the enemy is coming.
They want the heart. They want the power it holds.
Evan reached out slowly, his fingers brushing against the crystal. The moment his skin touched its surface, a shock of energy coursed through him, and he stumbled back, gasping for breath. The vision came instantly. He saw a world in flames, a planet torn apart by war. He saw the armor, the sacred armor, glowing brightly in the center of it all, surrounded by death and destruction. He saw himself, standing beside Salira, but he was no longer the man he was now. He was older, stronger, wearing the armor, his eyes glowing with the same power that emanated from the heart. But then, the vision shifted. He saw the enemy, a dark, twisted force that sought to destroy everything in its path. They were ruthless, relentless, and they wanted the heart, wanted its power for themselves. Evan could see it clearly now. The war that was coming, the choices he would have to make. The path ahead was filled with danger, with sacrifice, and with a future that was uncertain. Evan pulled his hand away from the crystal, his mind reeling. What was that? Was it a warning? Or was it a vision of what was to come? He couldn't tell. All he knew was that the weight of it, the knowledge of what was coming, felt like a burden he wasn't ready to carry. "Do you understand now?" Salira asked quietly, her voice full of concern. "The heart is not just the source of the armor's power. It is the key to our survival. And now, it has chosen you. Whether you are ready or not, you will have to fight. You will have to lead us." Evan looked at her, his mind spinning. "I'm not ready," he said, his voice barely above a whisper. Salira placed a hand on his shoulder, her expression softening. "None of us are, but we do not have a choice.
The enemy is coming, and when they do, we will need you."
Evan didn't know what to say. He wasn't a warrior. He wasn't a leader. He was just a man caught in the middle of something far greater than he could understand. But the heart, the armor, the visions, it was all real. And whether he was ready or not, he had been chosen. "Stay close," Salira said, her voice firm once more. "The battle is coming, and we will face it together." Evan nodded, though the weight of the world seemed to settle on his shoulders. He wasn't sure if he was ready to lead. But one thing was certain. He had no choice. The tension had only grown since the moment Salira had spoken those words. Evan had never felt more out of place, nor more burdened by the responsibility that now seemed to hang over him like a dark cloud. The enemy was coming, and the entire future of the Saren and his people seemed to rest in his hands. He had no choice but to prepare. But no matter how hard he tried to focus, the weight of the decision, of the vision, of the armor, gnawed at him. The days passed in a blur. Salira and the other guardians had worked tirelessly, preparing for the inevitable battle. They practiced their combat techniques, sharpened their weapons, and reinforced the city's defenses. But all the while, Evan felt like an outsider. He wasn't a warrior. He was a diplomat, a man from Earth who had just stumbled into something much larger than himself. Yet the armor had chosen him, and that decision was irreversible. He was tied to this conflict, whether he was ready or not. One evening, as the sun began to set over the city, Evan stood at the edge of the high platform that overlooked the city's main square. From here, he could see the sprawling metropolis, its streets alive with the movement of people going about their daily business. The sky had taken on a soft orange hue, and the first stars were beginning to appear in the growing darkness. It was peaceful, but that peace felt fragile, as if it could shatter at any moment. Evan felt a presence behind him and turned to find Sailora standing silently, watching the city as he was. Her expression was unreadable, but there was a certain heaviness in her gaze, a quiet understanding that passed between them without words. "You've been training hard," she said after a moment, her voice low. "The Saren have taught you well." Evan nodded but said nothing. He had tried to learn everything he could to be ready, but he knew deep down that he was not prepared. He was not one of them. He wasn't a warrior, and the thought of fighting, of leading, terrified him. Yet, with every passing day, the reality of the situation became clearer. The enemy would not wait. They would not hesitate. If they came, they would come with everything they had. "I'm not sure I can do this," Evan admitted quietly, looking away. "I'm not like you." "I'm not a fighter. I don't know how to lead them." Sailora stepped closer, her eyes softening. "You don't have to be like me," she said. "You just have to be who you are. The armor did not choose you because of your strength, Evan. It chose you because of your heart. You have something that the Saren have lost over time, the ability to see beyond the battle, to find peace in the chaos." Evan swallowed, unsure if her words were meant to reassure him or to prepare him for something even greater.
"But I'm not ready. How can I lead them?"
"How can I fight beside them? I've never fought in a war. I don't even know what to do with a sword." Sailora's gaze softened, but her voice remained firm. "None of us are truly ready, Evan.
"That is the way of war."
You will learn. You will adapt. And you will do what you must to protect your people. But more importantly, you will lead with honor. You will lead with your heart." Evan looked into her eyes and saw something he had never noticed before, a deep weariness, a burden that had weighed her down for as long as she could remember. She had seen countless battles, countless losses, and still, she stood, unbroken. But even she was afraid of losing, of failing. The sound of hurried footsteps interrupted their quiet moment, and they turned to see one of the guardians approaching, breathless with urgency. "Sailora," he said, his voice strained. "The enemy fleet has been spotted. They are within range." Evan felt a jolt of panic. The time had come. The enemy was finally here. Sailora nodded, her face hardening with determination. "It's time," she said. She turned to Evan, her expression softening just for a moment. "This is it. Are you ready?" Evan didn't know if he was ready, but he had no choice. He had to be. He nodded, his throat dry, his heart pounding. "I'll follow you." Sailora gave him a small, approving nod, and together they made their way toward the city's central command center. The streets were alive with activity now, the once calm atmosphere replaced with a sense of urgency. Soldiers were gathering in groups, preparing their weapons and donning their armor. The people of the city were taking shelter, hiding in the fortified buildings that had been constructed in anticipation of this day. As they entered the command center, Evan was immediately struck by the intensity of the situation. Maps of the city and the surrounding area covered the walls, and holographic screens flickered with information. Saren generals were gathered around, discussing strategy, their voices low and urgent. Sailora took her place at the center of the room, and the room fell silent. All eyes turned to her, waiting for her to speak. Evan stood at the edge of the room, his hands clenched at his sides, feeling more out of place than ever. This was a world he didn't understand, a world where power and tradition ruled, and he was just a man caught in the middle. "The enemy has arrived," Sailorai said, her voice commanding.
"They are powerful, and they will not stop until they have what they want. We must be ready to fight for our lives, for our people, and for our future. We will not back down." Evan felt the weight of her words settle in his chest.
The fate of everything, not just the Saren, but the future of humanity as well, rested on what they did next. Sailyra turned to the generals.
"Prepare the city's defenses. We will hold them off for as long as we can."
The heart of the pact must be protected at all costs. Evan's mind raced. The heart. The very thing the enemy was after. He could feel the pull of it, the energy that surrounded it. It was the source of the Saren's power, the key to everything. If it fell into the wrong hands, it could mean the end of everything they had fought for. But Evan knew there was no time to think about it. The enemy was here. The battle had begun. The ground trembled beneath their feet, and the sound of distant explosions echoed through the city. The enemy was attacking. Evan turned to Sailyra, his voice shaking. "What do I do?" She looked at him, her expression fierce. "You fight. You protect."
You lead. She turned and strode toward the door, and Evan followed, his heart pounding in his chest.
He had no idea what he was doing. But he knew one thing for certain. He couldn't back down now. Not when everything was at stake. The streets were chaos. The sounds of battle were everywhere. The clash of weapons, the roar of engines, the cries of the wounded. Evan found himself fighting alongside Saren warriors, his mind numb with fear and adrenaline. He had no experience, but his instincts took over. He held his sword with both hands, swinging it at the enemy forces with all his strength, trying to push them back. Sailyra was at his side, her movements fluid and deadly. She fought with precision, her eyes focused and unyielding. She was a warrior, born for this. And in that moment, Evan realized just how far he had to go. But he couldn't stop. Not now! The enemy continued to press forward, but the Saren held their ground, fighting with everything they had. Evan's heart raced as he fought, each swing of his blade pushing him further into the battle. He was afraid, but there was no time for fear. There was only the fight. Through the smoke and the chaos, Evan saw the enemy's leader, a dark figure, standing tall and commanding. The figure raised their hand, and a wave of energy surged through the air. The ground beneath them cracked, and the city shook. Evan felt the power of it, the raw energy that radiated from the figure. This was no ordinary enemy. This was something far worse. But then he saw it. The armor, the sacred armor, glowing brighter than ever before. And he knew without a doubt that the moment had come. The armor had chosen him, and now it was time to see what that choice meant. Evan's hand moved to his side, where the sword was strapped. The armor had called him, and now it was time for him to answer.